Eric looked up. What do you mean? She smiled as memories filled her eyes. When your father and I met, he had nothing. Not a car, not a house, nothing. He was just a young man with dreams and honesty. I fell in love with him because of who he was, not what he had. Together, we built everything from the ground up. That's the kind of love that lasts. Eric sighed. That kind of love doesn't exist anymore. Mom, times have changed. Mrs. Fiona shook her head. Love doesn't change, Eric, people do. A true love, real, pure love still exists. You just have to look for it the right way. He looked at her curiously. And how do I do that? She smiled, a spark of mischief in her tired eyes. By becoming someone ordinary, hide your wealth. Disguise yourself as a common man. If a woman can love you that way without knowing who you really are, then she's the one. Eric stared at her in disbelief. You want me to pretend to be poor? Yes, she said simply. Strip away everything. The cars, the mansion, the designer suits. Go out into the world as an ordinary man. See who will love you then. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Mom, that's crazy. I can't just walk out looking like a beggar. What if someone recognizes me? What if people laugh? She chuckled softly. So what if they do? You'll survive a little laughter. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find what your money couldn't buy. Eric rubbed his forehead, unsure whether to laugh or cry. But as he looked into her eyes, those same eyes that had always guided him, he felt something shift inside him. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. She nodded completely. You've tried everything else, and it hasn't worked. Try this for me. For love, for your happiness. He looked away for a moment, thinking hard. Then he exhaled slowly. Okay, Mom, I'll do it. Her face lit up with relief. That's my boy, she said, hugging him. For a long moment, they stayed that way, mother and son, holding on to each other as if time could be paused. Later that evening, after Mrs. Fiona left, Eric sat alone in his study. The glow of his laptop screen reflected on his thoughtful face. His mother's words echoed in his mind. If you wish to have what we had, you must strip yourself of riches. He looked at his reflection in the glass window, the billionaire everyone admired, and for the first time, he wondered what it would feel like to live without all of it. He called, Peter, come to my study. I need to talk to you. Minutes later, Peter walked in. Yes, sir. Eric leaned back in his chair. Peter, you've always been honest with me, right? Always, sir. Eric nodded. Good. I need your help with something unusual. Peter looked curious. Unusual? How? Eric took a deep breath. I need you to help me disguise myself as a beggar. Peter blinked, confused. A beggar, sir. Yes, my mom advised it. She wants me to find a woman who will love me without knowing I'm rich. Peter stared at him, half shocked, half amused. That's quite an idea, sir. I know it sounds ridiculous, Eric said with a small laugh. But she's right. I've tried every other way. Maybe this is what I need. Peter scratched his head. Well, if you're really serious about it, I can help. I know a place downtown where no one will recognize you. But you'll need to look the part. Old clothes, worn-out shoes, maybe some dirt on your face. Eric smiled. Then let's do it. Peter grinned. All right, boss. Tomorrow morning, we start Operation Find Real Love. Eric chuckled for the first time that day. Operation Find Real Love. He repeated. I like the sound of that. They both laughed. But deep inside, Eric felt nervous. He had no idea what awaited him, whether this crazy plan would lead to heartbreak, or the miracle he'd been searching for. That night, as he prepared for bed, he looked up at the sky again through his window. The moon shone brightly, just as it had the night before. Maybe this is it, he whispered to himself. Maybe this is how I'll find her. And with that thought, he turned off the lights and drifted to sleep, unaware that the next few days would change his life forever. The morning sun rose gently over the city, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and pink. Birds sang on the mansion's balcony as the wind rustled the flowers in the garden. But inside, Eric's bedroom looked like a completely different world. On the bed lay a pile of old torn clothes, a faded shirt, ripped jeans, dusty slippers, and a worn-out cap. Peter stood by the wardrobe, holding a brown bag filled with things he had gathered from the charity box behind the mansion. Eric stared at the clothes, half amused and half nervous. Are you sure about this look, Peter? Peter grinned. If you're going to pretend to be poor, you have to look the part. No one will believe you if you show up looking like a model. Eric sighed. I still can't believe I'm doing this. Peter handed him the shirt. Your mother's wish, remember. And who knows, sir, maybe this will be the start of something beautiful. Eric smiled faintly and put on the clothes. He looked in the mirror and gasped. He was almost unrecognizable. His neat hair was now ruffled, his face slightly smudged with dust, and the once confident billionaire now looked like a man life had forgotten. Peter laughed softly. Perfect. You look just like one of those men who sit near the market gates. Eric chuckled. Wow, Peter, that's the best compliment I've ever gotten. They both laughed, but inside, Eric's heart beat faster. This was it, the first day of his new life. A life without wealth, luxury, or fame. A life where he would be just Eric, not Mr. Raymond, the billionaire. By mid-morning, Peter drove the small black car toward the crowded part of town. They passed through busy streets filled with honking taxi drivers. women selling fruits, and children running around with school bags. The further they drove, the noisier and livelier it became. Finally, they reached a large open market filled with color and chaos. The smell of roasted corn, pepper soup, and fresh tomatoes filled the air. Traders shouted prices at the top of their voices, and people bargained loudly, waving Naira notes in the air. Peter parked the car a few streets away and turned to Eric. "Are you sure you're ready, boss?" Eric nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Remember," Peter said seriously, "no real name, no mention of the company, no sign of money. Just blend in and observe." Eric took a deep breath and nodded again. "Got it." He stepped out of the car and looked around. It felt strange being here without a bodyguard, without anyone rushing to greet him or open doors. He was invisible now, just an ordinary man. Peter handed him a small cup and whispered, "For the full effect, good luck, sir." Eric smiled. "Thanks, Peter. Don't go far. I'll be nearby, watching." And with that, Eric walked down the crowded path, toward a line of beggars sitting by the roadside. For the first time in his life, he sat down among them. The ground was rough, the sun hot, and the noise overwhelming. He glanced at the others, men and women whose eyes told stories of pain, survival, and hope. Eric felt a pang of guilt. He had never really understood what it meant to struggle until that moment. He sat quietly, pretending to beg, but his mind was still trying to adjust. "This is harder than I thought," he admitted to himself. About an hour later, something caught his attention. The sound of car tires screeching softly nearby. An SUV had just parked close to the market entrance. When the tinted glass rolled down, Eric's eyes widened. A young woman stepped out, elegant, and so breathtakingly beautiful that for a second, time itself seemed to pause. She wore a fitted white blouse and blue jeans, her dark curly hair tied in a ponytail that swung lightly as she walked. Her skin glowed under the sun, and her eyes carried the kind of confidence that turned heads. Eric stared, almost forgetting he was supposed to be a beggar. "She looks like an angel," he thought, but his daydream ended abruptly as he tried to approach her to ask for alms just to test her kindness. She turned, looked at him, and shouted, "Get away from me, you dirty man." Her voice was sharp and full of disgust. She pushed him back with her handbag, and Eric almost fell to the ground. A few people nearby turned to look. Embarrassed, he tried to steady himself, but before he could speak, another voice called out, "Hey, what's wrong with you? Why would you push him like that?" Everyone turned to see another young woman rushing forward. She was shorter, with gentle eyes and a soft expression. Her clothes were simpler, flowery dress and sandals, but her presence felt warm. Like sunshine after rain. The angry lady from the SUV rolled her eyes. "Oh, please stay out of this. Birds of a feather." She flipped her hair, muttered something under her breath, and walked off arrogantly toward the stalls. The kind lady helped Eric to his feet. "Don't mind her," she said softly. "Some people forget that life can change any time." Eric stared at her, still surprised that a stranger would stand up for him. "Thank you," he said quietly. She smiled. "It's nothing. My name's Lisa. And you?" "Eric," he replied quickly. "Well, nice to meet you, Eric." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You don't really look like someone who belongs here." Eric froze, afraid she had already guessed the truth. "What do you mean?" he asked nervously. She chuckled. "I mean, you seem different, calm, you speak politely. Most people around here are either rude or tired." He relaxed a little. "Oh, I guess I'm new here." "That explains it," she said with a smile. "This is my usual route to the market. My mother runs a small restaurant there. I help her deliver food orders, but right now, I'm late." She picked up a basket of vegetables from her car and waved. "See you around, Eric." What if the richest man alive disguised himself as a street beggar, just to find true love? You won't believe what happens next. Once upon a time, there lived a young billionaire named Eric Raymond. He was handsome, brilliant, and the kind of man people admired from afar. He owned one of the biggest phone companies in the country. His face was on magazine covers, and his name opened doors wherever he went. People often said, "Eric has it all. The cars, the mansion, the fame." But deep inside, Eric felt empty. He had money, success, and power. Yet, he couldn't find the one thing his heart truly longed for: love. Eric had dated several beautiful women models, actresses, influencers. All of them said they loved him. But after a few weeks or months, the truth always came out. They were only after his money, his lifestyle, or the fame that came with being seen beside him. Whenever he found out, it broke his heart all over again. Sometimes he wondered, is there still anyone out there who would love me for me, not for my bank account or my cars? Imagine giving up everything you own to test if love is real. That's exactly what Eric does next, and it changes everything. One Saturday evening, Eric sat in his luxurious living room, scrolling through his phone. He had met a new lady online named Sonia. Her profile was full of charity pictures and motivational quotes. She looked simple and kind, different from the others. Maybe, just maybe, she could be the one. They decided to meet at a fancy restaurant in town. When she arrived, Eric smiled. She was indeed beautiful. Tall, elegant, with a calm smile. For a moment, he felt a spark of hope. But as soon as they started talking, that spark began to fade. "So, Eric," she said, sipping her juice, "I heard you're into tech. You must sign a lot of contracts, right? Maybe we could discuss some partnership deals. My cousin owns an oil company." Eric tried to steer the conversation toward something personal, hobbies, family, dreams, but she kept talking about money, status, and power. When she said, "You're lucky to be rich. I can't imagine being with someone who doesn't have money," Eric's heart sank. He smiled politely, but deep down, he already knew. She wasn't different after all. After dinner, he drove home silently. The city lights glittered through his car window, but they couldn't light up the darkness he felt inside. That night, sleep refused to come. Eric walked out to the mansion's garden barefoot, wearing a plain white shirt and black sweatpants. The air was cool and soft, carrying the scent of roses. He sat by the fountain, staring at the water as it shimmered under the moonlight. "How can someone have everything," he whispered, "and still feel like they have nothing?" As he sat lost in thought, a familiar voice spoke behind him. "Sir, you've been sitting here for hours." It was Peter, his loyal driver and friend of many years. Peter wasn't just a driver. He had become like family. He had served Eric's parents before they passed the company on to him. Eric gave a weak smile. "I can't sleep, Peter." Peter walked closer, his voice calm and filled with concern. "You've not been yourself lately. Is everything okay?" Eric sighed. "I don't even know anymore. Peter, I have all the money in the world, yet I feel poor. Not poor in my pocket, but poor in my heart." Peter listened quietly. "I just want someone who loves me for me," Eric continued. "Not for the cars, or the mansion, or the fame. I've dated so many women, but once the topic of money comes up, it's over. Sometimes I wish I could just disappear and live like a normal person. Maybe then I'd find someone real." Peter nodded slowly. "Sir, sometimes people who have little see love more clearly than those surrounded by gold." Eric smiled faintly. "You always know how to say the right thing, Peter." Peter chuckled. "That's because I've lived long enough to see that happiness doesn't come from what you have, but who you have." Eric looked up at the stars, their reflections dancing in the fountain water. For a moment, he imagined a simpler life. No fame, no bodyguards, no reporters, just him and someone who saw his soul, not his status. After Peter left him to rest, Eric sat there for a while longer. He thought about his mother, Mrs. Fiona Raymond, a strong woman who had built their family empire alongside his late father. She used to tell him, "True love doesn't see wealth, it sees worth." Those words echoed in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. Maybe that was what was missing all along. Not love itself, but the right kind of love. He leaned back on the chair and closed his eyes, feeling the cool breeze brush his face. For the first time in a long time, he whispered a small prayer. "God, if there's someone out there who will love me for who I am, not what I have, please let her find me." As the night deepened, the sound of the city grew faint, leaving only the chirping of crickets and the gentle splash of water from the fountain. Eric finally stood up and walked back into the mansion. Every step echoed through the empty halls, a reminder that even the biggest houses can feel lonely when the heart inside them is empty. He looked around at the golden chandeliers, the marble floor, and the grand staircase. Everything was perfect, yet it all felt meaningless without love to share it with. He stopped at a portrait hanging on the wall, a photo of his parents on their wedding day. His father, in a simple suit, holding his mother's hands with joy shining in both their eyes. They didn't start rich. They built everything together from nothing. That was the kind of love Eric wanted. He touched the photo gently. "You had what money couldn't buy," he murmured. And in that quiet moment, standing in the middle of his grand but lonely home, Eric decided that no matter what it took, he would find love even if he had to lose everything first. He didn't know that this small decision made in the stillness of the night was about to change his life forever. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of the Raymond mansion, filling the living room with a soft golden glow. The air smelled like brewed coffee and blooming roses from the garden outside. Eric sat at the dining table, dressed neatly in a white shirt and navy blue trousers, his hair still damp from a quick shower. His breakfast sat untouched, a plate of toast, scrambled eggs, and orange juice. He scrolled through his phone, reading work emails, but his mind wasn't on business. He hadn't stopped thinking about last night, the stars, the loneliness, and the prayer he whispered before falling asleep. "Would anyone ever love me for who I really am?" He thought again. Just then, he heard the sound of the main gate opening and a car pulling into the driveway. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Moments later, the doorbell rang. Peter, his driver, hurried to open the door. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, sounding pleasantly surprised. When Eric looked up, he froze. Standing at the door, holding her designer purse and smiling warmly, was Mrs. Fiona Raymond, his mother. "Mom," he said, standing quickly, "you didn't tell me you were coming." She laughed softly. "Must I always tell you before I visit my only son?" Eric walked to her, hugging her tightly. "Of course not. I'm just surprised. It's been weeks." She pulled away to look at him. "You've lost weight," she said, pretending to scold him. "Are you eating properly, or just surviving on stress and coffee again?" He smiled. I'm fine, Mom, you worry too much. She sat on the sofa and gestured for him to join her. Peter brought her a glass of juice and left them alone. For a moment, there was silence. Mrs. Fiona stared at her son, and Eric noticed something different about her face. Her smile looked tired, her eyes a little dimmer than usual. He frowned. Mom, are you okay? She exhaled deeply and held his hand. Eric, I came because I need to talk to you about something important. Very important. The tone of her voice made him nervous. You're scaring me. What's going on? She hesitated for a moment before speaking. I've been sick, Eric. I went for some tests 2 weeks ago, and the doctors found something. Eric's heart skipped a beat. Found what? Cancer, she said quietly. It's in the late stages. They said I might have a year, maybe less. The words hit him like thunder. He froze, staring at her in disbelief. No, Mom, that can't be true. You look fine. You're strong. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled gently. I didn't want to tell you at first. I didn't want you to worry, but I can't hide it anymore. I need you to understand. Eric felt his throat tighten. There must be something we can do. I can call the best doctors in the world. We can fly anywhere. Money is not a problem. I know, my dear, she said, squeezing his hand. You've always been a good son, but some things are beyond money. I've accepted it, and I want you to accept it too. Eric stood up and paced the floor, fighting back tears. I can't just sit here and do nothing. Sit, she said softly, her voice firm but loving. There's one thing I need before I go. Just one thing that would make me truly happy. He sat beside her, still shaken. Anything, Mom, anything you want. She smiled faintly. I want to see you get married, Eric. I want to see your wife. Meet my grandchildren. If it's just one. Eric blinked, speechless. Mom, I've watched you grow into a successful man, she continued. But success means nothing if your heart is empty. You've built companies, but not a family. I want to see you with someone who loves you, truly loves you. Before my time is up, Eric looked down, his heart breaking. You think I don't want that? I've tried. Mom, every woman I meet is after my money. I can't tell who's real anymore. She reached out and touched his face gently. I know, that's why you must do what your father once did. Eric watched as she walked away, her basket swinging lightly by her side. He didn't know why, but his heart beat faster just watching her go. For the rest of the day, he couldn't stop thinking about her, her smile, her kindness, the way she looked at him like he was human, not just a poor man sitting on the street. Evening came, and the market began to quiet down. Vendors packed up their goods, and the sun slowly dipped below the horizon. Eric walked toward the car where Peter was waiting. When Peter saw him, he grinned. You survived your first day. Eric nodded, smiling barely, but something happened. Peter raised an eyebrow. Oh. Eric sat beside him in the car. I met someone. Her name's Lisa. Peter chuckled. Aha. Already making friends on the first day. Eric smiled wider. She defended me when another woman pushed me. She didn't even know who I was. She was kind. Peter genuinely kind. Peter's face softened. Sounds like a good person. She is. I could tell it wasn't about pity. It was about respect. She treated me like I mattered. Peter nodded. That's rare these days. Eric leaned back, looking out the window as the city lights flickered to life. I don't know what it is about her, Peter, but I feel peaceful, like I've known her all my life. Peter smiled knowingly. Maybe your mother's plan is working already. Eric chuckled. Maybe. They drove home through the quiet streets, the night wind brushing against the car windows. For the first time in years, Eric felt light, almost happy. He didn't think about business meetings, or money, or fame. All he thought about was Lisa, the girl who saw a beggar and still chose to show kindness. When they reached the mansion, Peter parked the car, and Eric stepped out, still smiling to himself. See you in the morning, Peter, he said. Peter grinned. Same time tomorrow. Eric laughed softly. Yes, I'm definitely going back. As he entered his room that night, he sat by the window, looking at the stars again just like the night before. Only this time, his heart felt warm. Lisa, he whispered, smiling to himself. Maybe you're the answer to my prayer. And as he closed his eyes, he didn't feel like the lonely billionaire anymore. For the first time in a long time, Eric slept peacefully, dreaming of a girl from the market whose kindness had touched his soul. The next morning came bright and warm. Eric stretched and smiled to himself. He hadn't felt this kind of excitement in a long time. He quickly got out of bed, washed up, and put on the same old clothes from yesterday, the faded shirt, the worn jeans, and the dusty slippers. His billionaire suits and designer shoes sat untouched in the wardrobe. Peter knocked softly and stepped into the room. Good morning, sir. Morning, Peter, Eric replied, still buttoning his shirt. Peter grinned. You look eager today. Eric chuckled. I can't explain it. I just want to see her again. The lady from yesterday. Eric nodded. Lisa. Peter smiled knowingly. I had a feeling. Let's go, boss. Same spot. The market was already alive by the time they arrived. Traders were shouting prices. Children were running around, and buses honked endlessly. The smell of food filled the air. Roasted corn, fried yam, and pepper soup. Peter parked the car a few meters away again and handed Eric a small plastic cup. "Good luck, sir," he said. Eric smiled. "Thanks. And Peter, no spying today." Peter laughed. "I'll try." Eric walked to the familiar corner and sat among the other beggars. He looked around, scanning the busy crowd. Every now and then, he'd glance toward the road, hoping to see that familiar face, the girl who had defended him like a friend. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The day grew hotter, and Eric began to think maybe she wouldn't come. But just as the clock struck midday, he heard a cheerful voice call out, "Eric." He looked up, and there she was. Lisa was walking quickly toward him, her basket balanced on one arm, her smile as bright as the sun. Beside her was another young woman, slightly taller, wearing a fitted t-shirt and jeans. Her expression was serious and a little proud. "Lisa," Eric said, his face lighting up. "You remember my name?" She teased. "Good, how could I forget?" He replied. "This is my sister, Ada," she said, motioning to the girl beside her. "We're helping our mom deliver some food orders from the restaurant." Ada barely looked at him. She folded her arms and frowned. "Lisa, are you seriously talking to this man again?" Lisa sighed. "Ada, not now." Ada ignored her and turned sharply toward Eric. "Why are you even talking to my sister? Don't you have somewhere else to sit?" Eric kept quiet. He didn't want trouble. Lisa glared at her sister. "Stop it, Ada." Ada's voice grew louder. "No, I won't stop. You're embarrassing yourself. What will people think when they see you talking to a beggar like him? Have you lost your mind?" People nearby began to glance at them. Eric lowered his head, pretending not to hear, but every word cut deep. Lisa pulled her sister aside. "Ada, leave me alone. You don't even know him." "I don't need to," Ada snapped. "Just look at him. What do you have in common with someone like that?" Lisa crossed her arms and said firmly, "He's human. Ada, just like us. Maybe if you looked past people's clothes, you'd see that too." Ada blinked in disbelief. "You're unbelievable," she muttered, rolling her eyes before walking off to the car. Lisa turned back to Eric, a bit embarrassed. "I'm so sorry about that. She doesn't mean to be rude. She just doesn't understand." "It's fine," Eric said softly. "I'm used to people looking down on me." Lisa shook her head. "You shouldn't have to be." She opened her basket and pulled out a plate wrapped neatly in foil. "Here, I brought you some food from our restaurant. I made sure it's still warm." Eric looked surprised. "You didn't have to, I wanted to," she interrupted with a smile. "Eat well." "Okay, I have to go make some deliveries now. I'll see you later." Before he could say another word, she waved and hurried off down the street. Eric looked at the food in his hands. Jollof rice with fried plantain and grilled fish. The aroma alone made his stomach growl. He took a bite, and his eyes widened. It was the most delicious meal he had ever tasted in his life. He smiled to himself. She really is different. By evening, the market began to quiet down. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and pink. Traders packed up their goods. Children chased each other between stalls, and the noise slowly faded. Eric sat waiting, wondering if Lisa would come back. And then, just as the last rays of light began to fade, she peered again, her basket now empty, her face glowing from a long day's work. "You're still here," she said, sounding surprised. "I wanted to thank you for the food," he said, smiling. "It was amazing." She laughed lightly. "I'll tell my mom. She's the real cook." He stood up from the ground. "You didn't have to defend me earlier, you know." Lisa looked at him with sincerity in her eyes. "Yes, I did. What that lady said yesterday, and then Ada today. Can't just stand by and watch people treat others like they're nothing. My mom always says, be kind, even when no one else is." Eric nodded slowly. "Your mom sounds like a wise woman." "She is," Lisa replied. "Even if she's strict sometimes." They began to walk slowly down the narrow road beside the market. The air smelled of roasted corn and rain-soaked dust. As they talked, Eric realized how easy it was to speak to her. No judgment, no pretending, just honest conversation. "So," she said after a while, "do you ever think about doing something else? I mean, instead of begging?" Eric hesitated. He couldn't tell her the truth, so he came up with a story. "I finished university a few years ago," he said carefully, "but finding a job has been hard. I tried everything, but nothing worked out, so I started coming here to survive while I keep applying." Lisa nodded slowly. "That must be tough," he shrugged. "Yeah, but I believe things will get better." "They will," she said confidently. "You speak like someone educated. You don't sound like a beggar at all." Eric smiled. "Maybe I just hide it." Well, she laughed softly. "Maybe." They walked quietly for a few moments. The sky darkened, and streetlights began to flicker on. They passed little shops closing for the day, and Lisa pointed out the small restaurant at the corner of the next street. "That's our place, Mama D's Kitchen. You should come someday. The food's better when eaten hot." Eric smiled. "I'd like that." They stopped outside a small bungalow painted light blue, with flower pots by the window and a wooden bench by the door. "This is where I live," she said. "Nice house," he said honestly. "Feels peaceful." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you. Anyway, I should go inside before Mom starts calling. She doesn't like me staying out late." Of course, Eric said softly. She paused for a second, then added with a shy smile, "See you tomorrow, Eric." He nodded. "I'll be here. Good night then." "Good night, Lisa." She turned and walked toward the house. Eric stood there for a while, watching as she opened the door and disappeared inside. For a long moment, he couldn't move. His heart was warm, his mind full. He hadn't felt this kind of happiness in years, not even when he signed million-dollar contracts or bought his favorite cars. He finally turned and walked toward where Peter had parked. The driver stepped out of the car, smiling. "You look like a man who's just seen the sun after a long storm." Eric laughed quietly. "Something like that." As they drove back to the mansion, the night breeze swept gently through the car. Eric looked out the window at the twinkling city lights, thinking only of Lisa, her smile, her kindness, her courage. "She's special, Peter," he said at last. "There's something about her I can't explain." Peter nodded knowingly. "Maybe, sir, you've just met the reason you started this journey." Eric smiled and looked back at the sky through the car window. The stars above seemed brighter tonight. He whispered almost to himself, "Lisa, maybe you're the miracle I didn't know I needed." And as the car disappeared into the night, a quiet feeling settled in his heart. Something new, something real, the beginning of love. Mama D's expression hardened instantly. "Lisa," she said in disbelief, "you brought a beggar into my restaurant." "Mom, please, do you know what people will say?" Mama D snapped, "I work hard every day to build this name, and you're here bringing market beggars into my business. Have you lost your mind?" "Mom, he's not," but Mama D didn't let her finish. She pointed at Eric. "You, what do you want here? If you're looking for free food, go somewhere else. Don't you people have shame?" Customers turned to look. Ada stood frozen, half embarrassed, half smug. "Mama, stop," Lisa shouted, tears forming in her eyes. "He's my friend. He's kind. He's gentle. He helped me yesterday when I almost dropped my basket." Her mother folded her arms. "Friend, Lisa, do you want to disgrace me? What kind of respectable girl calls a street beggar her friend?" Eric stood still, his heart aching. He'd never felt so humiliated, but he tried to stay calm. "Ma," he said softly, "I didn't mean any harm. I only came because your daughter invited me." "Then she made a mistake," Mama D said coldly. "Leave my restaurant before I throw you out myself." Lisa gasped. "Mom, no." Eric looked at Lisa. Her eyes were wet, trembling. He wanted to tell her it was okay, that he understood, but no words came out. He simply nodded, turned, and walked out quietly. Outside, the air felt heavier. Lisa ran after him, her sandals tapping against the pavement. "Eric, wait," she called. He turned. "I'm so sorry," she said, panting. "Please don't be angry. She doesn't understand." Eric gave her a sad smile. "You don't have to apologize. She's your mother. I get it." "No, it's not fair," Lisa said, wiping her tears. "She judged you without even knowing you." Eric touched her hand gently. "Lisa, I've lived long enough to know people judge what they see. Don't worry, it doesn't change how I feel about you." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "Promise me you won't stop coming." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I'll try." She nodded, then whispered, "Goodbye, Eric." "Goodbye, Lisa." As she walked away, Eric stood still for a long time, watching her disappear into the crowd. The ache in his chest grew heavier with every step she took. When Peter finally pulled up nearby, Eric climbed into the car silently. "Sir," Peter asked gently. "She's amazing," Eric said quietly, "but her mother hates me." The next few days passed like a dream for Eric. Every morning he would wake up before the sun fully rose, pull on his old disguise, and ask Peter to drive him to the market. It became his favorite part of the day, not because of the noise, or the heat, or the chaos, but because of one person, Lisa. Each day, she came by with a warm smile and a plate of food from her mother's restaurant. Sometimes she stayed and talked. Sometimes she just waved and hurried off to run errands. But every little moment with her made Eric's heart lighter. She spoke about her dreams, how she wanted to expand her mother's restaurant, maybe open a bakery someday. Eric listened with genuine interest, smiling every time her eyes lit up with passion. He too shared a little about himself, not the billionaire part, of course, but stories about a man he used to work for and how much he admired his kindness and generosity. It was his way of speaking about his own life without revealing who he truly was. Lisa often teased him, "You don't sound like a beggar at all. Eric, you sound like someone who belongs in an office." He'd chuckle in reply, "Maybe I was meant to be one someday." Their friendship grew naturally, like morning sunlight creeping through a window, soft, warm, and impossible to ignore. One cool evening, the sky blushed with fading sunlight, and the scent of roasted corn drifted through the market. Lisa and Eric strolled side by side along the quiet path behind the stalls. Vendors were packing up, and the air felt lighter, calmer, the kind of evening when secrets wanted to be told. For almost an hour, they walked, talking about everything and nothing, about dreams, about music, about life's small unfairness. Lisa laughed at the way Eric described the noisy market women who always fought over customers. Eric, in turn, teased her about the way she wrinkled her nose whenever she was deep in thought. There was something effortless between them. Then Lisa suddenly stopped walking. Her eyes sparkled like city lights reflected in water. "You know what, Eric?" she said, smiling. "You make everything feel easy. I don't even know why I talk so freely with you." Eric chuckled softly. "Maybe because we understand each other, maybe." She turned to face him fully now. "But it's strange. I've known people all my life, yet no one has ever made me feel this safe." Her voice grew quieter with each word. The streetlight above flickered on, wrapping them in a soft glow. Eric's heart beat faster. He wanted to tell her that she made him feel the same, that when she smiled, the world didn't feel so empty anymore. "Lisa," he whispered. She looked up, and their eyes met. Time slowed. The noise of the market faded until there was only the sound of their breathing. Eric took a small step closer. "You're the first person who's looked at me and seen more than what I appear to be," he said quietly. Lisa's lips parted slightly. "And you're the first person who listens when I talk about my dreams." They stood there for a moment, neither knowing what to say next. Then, as if drawn by something neither could control, Eric reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Lisa's breath hitched. He leaned in slowly, carefully giving her time to pull away, if she wanted to, but she didn't. Her eyes fluttered shut, and in the soft silence of that warm evening, their lips met. The kiss was gentle, sweet, and trembling, the kind of kiss that feels like the start of something beautiful and dangerous all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, their cheeks glowing. Lisa giggled nervously and looked away. "I can't believe I just did that," she whispered. Eric smiled. "Then we're both guilty." They walked again, this time their hands brushing occasionally, neither daring to pull away. As they reached the corner of her street, Lisa turned to him with a spark of excitement still in her eyes. "Tomorrow," she said, "I want you to come to our restaurant." Eric blinked. "Your restaurant?" "Yes," she nodded quickly. "Mama D's Kitchen, my mom's place in the market. I want her to meet you. You're always talking about how you love her cooking, so now you'll taste it fresh." He hesitated. "You really want me to meet your family?" "Of course," she said with a grin. "You'll love my mom. She's strict but sweet once she warms up to people. And Ada," she paused, smiling sheepishly. "Well, Ada can be dramatic, but don't mind her." Eric chuckled nervously. "If you say so, promise me you'll come." He looked at her hopeful eyes, reflecting the streetlight. "I promise." Lisa smiled and lightly touched his hand. "Good night, Eric." "Good night, Lisa." He watched her walk into her house, her laughter still echoing in his heart. That night at the mansion, Eric couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, replaying that kiss in his mind over and over again. He smiled to himself like a teenager in love for the first time. Peter found him the next morning, sitting at the table and grinning into his cup of coffee. "You look different today, boss," he said teasingly. Eric laughed. "Maybe because I kissed someone last night." Peter's eyes widened. "The market girl, her name is Lisa," Eric corrected with a smile. "And yes," Peter chuckled. "Well, congratulations, sir. The disguise seems to be working in mysterious ways." Eric shook his head. "She's different, Peter. She didn't care that I'm poor. She just, cares." Peter nodded knowingly. "That's rare. Hold on to that." By mid-morning, Eric was back in his disguise, the worn-out shirt, dusty jeans, and cap. But this time, he didn't feel nervous. He felt proud to be someone simple. Proud to be the man Lisa liked for his heart, not his wealth. When he reached the market, Lisa was already waiting by the entrance. She wore a bright green dress and carried her usual basket of food. Her smile made everything else fade. "You came," she said, laughing. "I promised I would," he replied. "Good. Come with me. Mom's inside, preparing for the lunch rush." They walked side by side through the crowded stalls until they reached Mama D's Kitchen, a small, colorful restaurant tucked in the middle of the market. The smell of stew and fried plantain filled the air. Eric could hear the clatter of pots and the laughter of customers eating at wooden tables. Lisa pushed the curtain aside and called, "Mom, someone's here to meet you." A woman in her late 50s turned from the counter. Her head tie was neatly wrapped, her eyes sharp with the confidence of someone who had seen life. This was Mama D. At first, she smiled, but when her eyes landed on Eric, the smile vanished. "Lisa," she said slowly, "who is this?" "Mom, this is Eric," Lisa said cheerfully. "My friend." Before her mother could speak, Ada walked in carrying a tray of drinks. She froze "Wait, Mama, that's the same beggar I told you about. The one Lisa always talks to." Eric's heart dropped. Peter sighed. People fear what they don't understand. Eric looked out the window, whispering, "Then maybe it's time she saw who I really am." Peter frowned. "Not yet." "Let's test her first. If Lisa truly loves you for who you are, not what you have, then she's the one." Eric nodded slowly. "All right, tomorrow, we test her." He leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes, the memory of that kiss still lingering like a promise. A promise he hoped would survive whatever came next. The next morning arrived bright and clear. The mansion felt quiet, but inside, Eric was wide awake and restless. He had spent most of the night thinking about Lisa, her kindness, her honesty, her courage to stand up for him. He wanted to believe she truly loved him for who he was, but part of him still needed to be sure. Peter walked into the room and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, lost in thought. "Boss," he said softly, "you haven't touched your breakfast." Eric looked up and smiled faintly. "I'm not hungry. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. Maybe it's time to know where Lisa's heart really lies." Peter nodded. "Then let's test her. It's the only way to be certain." Eric hesitated, then stood up. "All right, let's do it." Peter grinned. "I'll play the rich man. You stay at the market while I visit her house. If she's the woman you think she is, you'll have your answer by sunset." Eric walked over to his wardrobe and picked out one of his finest suits, a dark gray designer suit that shimmered under the morning light. "Wear this," he said, handing it to Peter, "and take the Ferrari." Peter's eyes widened. "The Ferrari 458, Italia boss. That's your favorite car." Eric smiled. "Exactly. Let's make this test look real." By mid-morning, Peter looked like a completely different man. His hair was neatly brushed back, his shoes polished, his wristwatch gleaming. When he stepped out of the mansion, wearing the expensive suit, even the security guards turned to stare. "Wow," Eric said, half laughing. "You clean up better than I expected." Peter adjusted his tie proudly. "A man has to look the part, boss." He climbed into the Ferrari, revved the engine, and gave Eric a confident nod. "Wish me luck." Eric smiled, though his stomach twisted with nerves. "Good luck, my friend. Let's hope love wins today." Peter saluted jokingly and drove off the car purring like a beast as it sped down the road. At the same time, Eric put on his usual disguise, the faded shirt, the rough jeans, and the old slippers. Peter dropped him off near the market before heading toward Lisa's neighborhood. Eric sat quietly by his usual spot, pretending to beg, but his mind was far from the noisy crowd around him. His thoughts were with Lisa. Would she stay true? Would she say no to the temptation of wealth? He could only hope. Meanwhile, Peter's Ferrari glided smoothly through the narrow streets of downtown. As expected, people turned their heads, immediately pointing and whispering as the shiny car came to a stop near Lisa's small bungalow. Lisa and Ada had just stepped out, carrying 2 baskets of food to deliver to customers. When they saw the car, Ada's mouth fell open. "Lisa, look," she whispered. "That car costs more than our entire house." Lisa glanced briefly and smiled. "It's just a car, Ada, just a car," Ada said, half laughing. "That's a Ferrari." Before Lisa could respond, Peter rolled down the window, flashed a charming smile, and called out, "Excuse me, ladies." Lisa turned politely. "Good morning, sir." Peter stepped out of the car, his shoes shining, his voice smooth. "Good morning, beautiful. I hope I'm not disturbing." Lisa smiled politely. "Not at all, sir." Peter looked at her carefully, pretending to be struck. "You are one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. I just had to stop and talk to you." Ada's eyes went wide. "Wow, thank you, sir," she said quickly, but Lisa gently elbowed her to stay quiet. Lisa chuckled softly. "You're very kind, sir, but I'm not interested." Peter raised an eyebrow. "Not even in a friendly lunch. I promise, I don't bite." Lisa shook her head. "I appreciate it, but I have a boyfriend." Peter laughed lightly. "A boyfriend? Come on, don't tell me a woman like you is already taken." Lisa nodded. "I am." Peter folded his arms. "You know, I could change your life in a heartbeat. See that car?" He pointed to the Ferrari. "That's one of my many cars. I have houses, businesses, and everything a woman could dream of. One date, and I could give you the world." Lisa smiled gently. "Sir, money doesn't impress me. I'm happy with who I have. I love my boyfriend, and no matter what you have, I wouldn't trade him for anything." Ada gasped, nearly dropping her basket. "Lisa, are you crazy?" she whispered loudly. Lisa ignored her. "Thank you for the offer, sir, but no." Peter paused, then nodded respectfully. "You're a rare woman, Lisa. Your boyfriend is lucky." Lisa smiled. "He's not rich, but he's kind. That's enough for me." Peter gave a small bow and smiled. "Good day, Miss Lisa, good day, sir." He got back into the Ferrari, revved the engine, and drove off. As soon as the car disappeared, Ada spun around, glaring at her sister. "Lisa, what did you just do?" Lisa looked confused. "What do you mean? What do I mean?" Ada shouted. "A billionaire just asked you out, and you said no. You could have had everything. Money, fame, a better life." Lisa frowned. "Ada, stop. You don't even know that man, and I'm not interested in money." Ada crossed her arms. "Please tell me you're not talking about that street beggar again." Lisa frowned. "Don't call him that, Ada." "But it's true," Ada said, throwing her hands up. "You're falling for a man who has nothing while a rich man literally begged to take you out. Who does that?" Lisa turned around dramatically and pointed toward the direction where Peter had driven off. "Then go after him, Ada. Marry him yourself if you want money so badly. I'm not stopping you." Ada glared, but said nothing. Lisa adjusted her basket and walked off toward the market, her head held high. Back at the market, Eric sat at his usual spot, pretending to beg, but secretly waiting. Every time someone passed, he glanced up, hoping to see her. The sun climbed higher, and sweat trickled down his neck. He was nervous, maybe even scared of what Peter's report would be. Then finally, he saw her. Lisa was walking toward him, smiling, her eyes bright as always. "Eric," she called. He smiled back. "Hey, Lisa." She sat beside him for a moment, handing him a small plate of food. "How was your day?" "Busy," he said with a grin. "Yours?" "Eventful," she said, laughing softly. "A man came to ask me out this morning." Eric's heart skipped. "Oh," he asked, pretending to sound casual. "What did you tell him?" "I said no." "Of course," she said simply. "He looked rich, came in a fancy car and everything." Ada nearly lost her mind. She said, "I was stupid for turning him down, but I don't care. I don't want money, Eric, I just want you." Eric blinked, speechless for a moment. He felt something warm fill his chest. Joy, relief, and gratitude all at once. "You really mean that?" he asked softly. Lisa nodded. "I do." He smiled gently. "Then, I'm the luckiest man alive." They walked together as the sky turned gold with sunset. When they reached the front of Lisa's house, she stopped, smiling shyly. "You know, for someone who calls himself unlucky, you make me smile a lot." Eric laughed softly. "And you make me believe again." Without thinking twice, Lisa leaned forward and kissed him, a soft, sweet kiss that made time stand still. But before they could even breathe, a loud voice shouted behind them, "Lisa." They turned to see Mama D standing by the gate, holding a wooden spoon in one hand and fire in her eyes. "Mama," Lisa stammered, "what are you doing with this homeless man?" she demanded. "Mama, he's my friend," Lisa said quickly. "We friend? You're kissing him. Have you gone mad?" Mama D's voice rose, echoing down the street. "In love with a beggar? Not in my house." She dropped the spoon, grabbed a stick from beside the wall, and charged toward them. Eric jumped back in shock. "Mama, please," Lisa cried, trying to hold her back. "Leave me," she pointed at Eric. "If I ever see you near my daughter again, I'll beat the poverty out of you." Eric didn't wait to argue. He turned and ran down the street as Mama D shouted after him. Lisa tried to stop her mother, but it was useless. "Go inside before you disgrace me further," Mama D barked. Lisa's eyes filled with tears as she watched Eric disappear around the corner. Moments later, a black Ferrari rolled to a stop beside the road where Eric was catching his breath. Peter stepped out, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Boss, you should have seen yourself running," he teased. Eric managed a weak laugh. "I almost got hit with a stick." Peter grinned. "But guess what? Your girl passed the test. She turned me down flat, said she loved you, and nothing could change that." Eric smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I knew it, Lisa's the one." Peter nodded. "Now it's time." Eric looked up. "Time for what?" "The reveal," Peter said. "Let's show her who you really are." Eric took a deep breath, still smiling. "All right, tomorrow, she'll finally know the truth." The next morning, the city woke to the sound of birds, car horns, and the faint chatter of traders setting up their stalls. But inside the Raymond mansion, it was unusually quiet. Eric stood before the mirror in his walk-in closet, buttoning a crisp white shirt. Gone was the old faded disguise. Today, he dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His hair was neatly brushed, his shoes gleamed, and his expression was calm. Yet underneath, his heart raced faster than it ever had before. Peter walked in, already in his driver's uniform. "You ready, boss?" Eric nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. "Yesterday's the day she finds out everything." Peter smiled proudly. "She deserves to know the truth. And after yesterday, she's earned it." Eric took a deep breath. "I just hope she doesn't hate me for lying to her." Peter's smile softened. "If she truly loves you, she'll understand. Love forgives." Eric looked at himself one last time in the mirror. He hardly recognized the man staring back, the billionaire who had pretended to be poor just to find love. "Let's go," he said quietly. When the Rolls-Royce pulled into the market, the sound of its powerful engines silenced everything. Traders stopped mid-sentence. Some shaded their eyes to see better. The car gleamed under the sun like liquid silver. "Who be that?" A woman selling vegetables whispered. "It must be the governor." Another replied, clutching her basket. The car slowed and finally stopped, right in front of Mama D's kitchen. Peter quickly stepped out, opened the back door, and Eric emerged. For a second, it felt as though the entire market had frozen. The same man who used to sit on the roadside wearing torn clothes now stood before them dressed like royalty. His wristwatch alone could pay for every stall in the market twice over. Lisa's sister Ada was inside helping to serve customers when she noticed the commotion. She ran outside, followed closely by her mother. The crowd parted as Eric stepped forward. "Mama D," someone whispered, "isn't that the beggar your daughter was always talking to?" Mama D frowned, squinting at him. "What nonsense are you saying? That can't be." She stopped mid-sentence as her eyes widened. "Wait, is that really him?" Ada gasped loudly. "Mama, it's him. That's the same man." At that moment, Lisa came out from the restaurant, wiping her hands on a napkin. "What's going on here?" she asked, confused. Then her eyes met his for a long, breathless moment. Neither spoke. The noise of the market faded until it was just the two of them, the beggar and the billionaire, the lie and the truth, standing face to face. "Eric," she whispered. He smiled softly. "Hi, Lisa." Lisa blinked in disbelief. What is this? Why are you dressed like this?" Mama D turned to her daughter, still shocked. "Lisa, you know this man?" "Yes, Mama," Lisa said quietly. "This is Eric." "Eric." Mama D looked between them, her mouth open. "You mean the beggar, Eric?" Eric took a step closer. "I'm sorry for the confusion, ma'am. I'm not who you thought I was." Ada's eyes darted from the Rolls-Royce to his suit, then back at his face. "You're rich." Eric nodded slowly. "My full name is Eric Raymond. I own Raymond Telecommunications. I came here disguised as a poor man because I wanted to find someone who would love me for me, not my money." The crowd gasped. Mama D covered her mouth. Lisa's face turned pale. "You mean," she said quietly, "you lied to me all this time?" Eric's heart sank at the hurt in her voice. "Lisa, please listen. I didn't mean to hurt you. I needed to be sure. I've been surrounded by people who only saw my wealth. I wanted to know what real love felt like. And then I met you." Lisa took a step back. "You used me, Eric. You made me believe you were poor. You let my mother humiliate you. You let me defend you over and over, all while laughing inside." "No," Eric said quickly, his voice trembling. "I was never laughing. Every moment with you was real. I may have lied about who I was, but not about how I feel." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Then how can I trust anything you say now?" The crowd murmured around them. Mama D wiped her hands nervously on her apron. "My son," she said gently, "I owe you an apology. I didn't know who you were." Eric turned to her, forcing a small smile. "It's okay, ma'am. You were only protecting your daughter." He turned back to Lisa. "Lisa, please. I didn't come here to show off. I came to tell you the truth because you deserve to know. You've proven that you love me for who I am. You passed the test, and that means more to me than anything." But Lisa shook her head, her voice breaking. "I don't want to be someone's test, Eric. I want it to be someone's choice." The words hit him like a knife. He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "Please don't touch me," she whispered, turning her face as tears rolled down her cheeks. Then, without another word, she turned and ran back toward the restaurant. Pushing through the crowd that had gathered, Eric stood frozen, his chest aching. The noise of the market returned. Whispers, gasps, the soft clicking of cameras from curious onlookers. Peter stepped forward quietly. "Boss, let's go." Eric nodded slowly. His throat felt dry. He turned toward Mama D, who looked both guilty and astonished. "I'm sorry for causing a scene," he said softly. "You're a good man," she said, her voice shaky. "And I was wrong about you. Please forgive me." Eric gave a polite nod, then turned and walked back to the car. The crowd parted silently as he passed. When he climbed into the Rolls-Royce, Peter closed the door behind him and got into the driver's seat. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engine filled the silence. Finally, Peter said, "Boss, at least now she knows the truth." Eric stared out the window, watching the market fade into the distance. "Yes," he said quietly, "but knowing the truth might have broken her heart." Peter sighed. "Give her time. She just needs to understand why you did it." Eric nodded, but said nothing. His mind was full of memories. Her laughter, her kindness, that first kiss under the streetlight, and now the look in her eyes when she realized he wasn't who she thought he was. By the time they reached the mansion, the sun was already beginning to set. The golden light filled the living room as Eric sank into the sofa, feeling emptier than ever. Peter stood nearby, unsure what to say. "Do you think she'll forgive me?" Eric asked quietly. Peter smiled faintly. "I think love always finds a way back." "If it's real," Eric leaned back and closed his eyes. "Then, I'll wait no matter how long it takes." Outside, the sky dimmed to purple. Somewhere far across the city, Lisa sat in her small room, her head buried in her hands. She couldn't stop replaying everything. His words, his face, his confession. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "He lied to me, but why does my heart still love him?" Neither of them knew it yet, but this was not the end of their story. It was only the silence before the storm and the beginning of something even deeper. The days after Eric's reveal felt long and heavy for Lisa. The market no longer felt cheerful. The sound of traders calling out to customers and the smell of her mother's cooking, none of it brought her joy anymore. At night, she'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had changed so fast. She missed him, his laughter, his warmth, the way he always listened. But every time she remembered the truth, her heart tightened. "He lied to me," she would whisper to herself. "But why does it still hurt like I lost something precious?" One afternoon, Ada entered her room, holding a bowl of rice. "Lisa, you haven't eaten again," she said softly. "I'm not hungry," Lisa murmured, her voice flat. Ada sat beside her. "You know, I didn't like that Eric guy at first, but now, I think he's the real deal." Lisa turned to her slowly. "The real deal? He lied about who he was." Ada nodded. "Yes, but think about it. He could have pretended forever. He could have hidden it from you even longer, but he told you the truth himself. Doesn't that say something?" Lisa didn't answer. Aside, he didn't lie to hurt you. He just wanted to know if someone could love him without money, and you proved that you could. Don't you see? You were his answer. Lisa stayed quiet, staring at the floor. Ada stood up and placed a hand on her shoulder. Maybe you should hear him out. Even if it doesn't change anything, at least you'll have peace. And with that, Ada walked out, leaving her sister deep in thought. Later that evening, Ada sent Peter a quick message. She's home. You can bring him. An hour later, Lisa heard a knock at the door. She assumed it was a neighbor and opened it tonally to freeze. It was Eric. He looked different this time, not like a billionaire and not like the poor man she'd met. He was dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans. No guards, no flashy car waiting outside. Just him. Her heart skipped, but she quickly folded her arms. What are you doing here? I came to see you, he said quietly. Please, Lizaj, give me 5 minutes. After that, if you still want me gone, I'll leave. Lisa hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. He walked in slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. The smell of stew filled the air from the kitchen, and for a moment, the house felt too quiet. Lisa, he began softly, I know I hurt you, and I've replayed it 100 times in my head, wondering how I could have done it differently. But I didn't lie because I wanted to fool you. I lied because I was tired of living in a world where no one saw me, just my money. She looked away. You could have trusted me. I know, he said quickly, and that's what breaks me the most. You didn't ask for anything from me, not money, not gifts. You gave me kindness when I had nothing to offer you. You saw me when no one else did. Lisa's eyes glistened with tears, but she blinked them away. You made me look like a fool. Eric, my mom, my sister, they all laughed at me. Eric took a small step closer. No, Lisa, you were the only one who saw the truth. You saw the man behind the disguise. You gave me a reason to believe that love still exists. He took a deep breath. I don't expect you to forgive me today, but I came here to tell you that I love you, and I'll keep proving it until you believe me again. Lisa's lips trembled. You're stubborn, you know? Eric smiled faintly. Only when it comes to you. A small silence fell between them. Lisa looked up, her eyes meeting his on for a brief moment. Everything felt like it used to. Simple, honest, and warm. Do you really mean all this? She asked softly. With all my heart, he whispered. Lisa let out a shaky breath. You hurt me, Eric, but I can't lie to myself. I still love you. I tried not to, but I do. Eric's heart skipped. Lisa, before he could say anything more, she stepped forward and hugged him. For a second, he froze, then wrapped his arms around her tightly. They stayed like that for a long moment. No words, just forgiveness flowing in silence. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet but smiling. So, what happens now? Eric smiled softly. Now I make it up to you. She tilted her head. How? He reached into his pocket, his heart racing. Like this. Lisa frowned slightly as he knelt down on one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth. Eric, he smiled nervously. I know this might seem sudden, but I've waited for this moment from the day you defended me at that market. You stood by me when I had nothing, even when everyone told you to walk away. And I can't imagine my life without you in it. He opened a small velvet box. Inside was a ring not too big, not too flashy, just beautiful and sincere. Lisa, he said softly, his voice trembling, will you marry me? Not for the cars or the mansion, but for this. He placed his hand on his chest. For my heart that belongs to you. Lisa stared at the ring, tears welling up again. She laughed through her tears, shaking her head in disbelief. You're unbelievable, she whispered. Is that a yes? He asked with a hopeful smile. She nodded quickly, her laughter breaking into soft sobs. Yes, Eric, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and before either of them could say another word, she pulled him into a hug. Outside, the evening breeze blew softly, carrying the faint sounds of the market in the distance. Peter, who had been waiting by the car, smiled when he saw them through the window. Finally, he whispered to himself. Weeks later, their wedding was the talk of the town. It wasn't the luxury that made it beautiful, though. Everything sparkled but the story behind it. The girl from the market and the billionaire, who once disguised himself as a beggar, Mrs. Fiona. Eric's mother looked radiant as she watched her son say his vows. You found her, she whispered tearfully, the one who loves you for you. Lisa smiled at Eric, her heart full. I loved you when you had nothing, she said softly, and I'll love you no matter how much you have. Eric squeezed her hands, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'll never need to hide again. As they kissed under the soft glow of the evening sky, the crowd cheered. The city that once saw a beggar now saw a man reborn not by money, but by love. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to Black Ink Tales and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.